All right, YouTube, Repo Man 64. I tried to share my screen with that last program and it wouldn't let me. And then I tried to do it on another program and it wouldn't let me. And then this program doesn't do lives. So, or at least as far as I know, I guess I would have to, if we're not raptured out of here soon, go ahead and pay for the StreamYard version. It seems like when it's free, it doesn't work as well. So I will have to do that. So I'll just make the video. I kind of want to interact with people and chat with you guys. I guess what I can do is turn this into a premiere so I can sit there and chat with you in the premiere on it. And so let's see here. What did I do? Need to minimize that. I'm sharing my screen. Going here. Okay. So now that I've all flustered over that and got all that messed up, I guess I'll call this take four because I tried it two other times. It didn't work. This 0 year, we always have to contend with the 0 year. I remember when I built the first timeline, I always had to contend with that extra day. The same thing happened when I built this timeline, which kind of tells me I'm onto something here. So I've been saying forever that Jesus went to the cross on March 30th, 30 AD, and he did. The problem is that the time that we see based on that 0 year is off by a year. So it would appear that Jesus went to the cross in 31 AD based on this Catholic monk's concept of BC and AD. If he hadn't done that in 525 AD, if he hadn't created this system, first of all, he was wrong. Creation obviously began in 4000 BC or 4001, and in 4000 BC, man was created and Jesus came to fix what mankind had messed up. You can see here from September the 16th when man was created to September the 30th. And I say September the 16th and September the 30th because that's what it is on my timeline, but the distances don't change. Whatever timeline you want to use, the distances can't change. We cannot say, well, Jesus came, that Jesus, what they, and I've seen this lately, is that what they'll try to do is say that, well, it was from creation, and they take those 31 years away and call creation 3978. I don't even know what the number is they came up with. And they're trying to make the statement that that was 33 and a half years after creation. And that's just simply not true. Jesus came here, began everything when he was born on September the 30th on Tabernacles. From our viewpoint on this side, it would be 4 BC, but it's actually 3 BC when he came. Because of that, they have messed with calendars so much, and it's taken me so long to decipher what they did, and now that I know what they did, it's even harder for me to articulate it to you what they did. But I will always come on here and reattempt to articulate it in a fashion to where we can all understand. Because I try to get it down to the bare minimum for even me to understand, because I'm not that smart a guy. So I need to put it on a timeline like this so I can see how it plays out. And it's got to make sense. It has to make sense. Creation forever. We've always known creation was in 4003 BC. They're changing it now to try to make the time be 6,000 years, 6 days. And on the sixth day, God created man. It makes sense that after 6,000 years, the problem is that you have to remove the time that Satan would have to complain about. We are in the year 6,000, and let me see if I can remember, 6,027, actually. This is not the year 2025. It's the year 2024. And I'll show that to you. There's so much math being jumbled all around that to lock it all down is very difficult. So even me, not working on the Jubilee, was confused about when Jesus went to the cross. He, in fact, did go to the cross on March 30th, 30 AD, but it's not 30 AD. He went in 31 AD. It's very, and the 6,000 years, you got 4,000 years and you got 2,000 years. The problem is Satan would have a complaint about this amount of time. Now, I took the 2,000 years to the rapture, but technically it goes to, um, the 2,000 years goes to the end of tribulation. But when you factor in the 33 and a half, and yes, Jesus was here 33 and a half years. I see them saying, well, Jesus only went through one Passover. I'm going to show you here in a moment a little graph that I built to show you that Jesus actually was the fourth Passover that he spent. Jesus spent 33 Passovers here since he was born. But since he was baptized, he spent four. And I'll show that to you. They found it. You can Google it. They have found it hundreds of years ago, and nobody ever knew how to apply it. And I'll show you how to apply it here in a moment. But Satan would have a railing accusation saying, wait a minute, yeah, you were there with them. You were healing them. You're doing all this stuff. I know it wasn't a worldwide thing, although I would imagine that somewhere thousands of miles away, somebody heard about this guy named Jesus and his healing powers and thought to themselves, man, I wish that guy would do it for me. And then suddenly they were healed. I would imagine that that took place. God didn't limit himself to just Israel and the Jews. I think that that would have happened. Now, that's just me guessing, but God is all powerful. And I would imagine that that transpired. So 33 and a half years. Then you have the year and 10 days that they were on Noah's Ark. So you have 34 and a half years. And then you have Exodus 12, where God changed the head of the year by 6 months. He moved it. God doesn't change, but he definitely moves, and he moved it. And so what do we see? We come over here. When we do a Jubilee count, it adds up to 6,027. I would say, and I've gotten a couple emails, but I will still say that the rapture must occur in a Jubilee year. We just never knew when it was. This information just came to me, and putting it all down, how it works for me. I've said this before. I'm nothing special, but numbers start jumping through my head. Addition, subtraction, years, jubilees. So I sat down and I figured out the jubilee. I sat down and I figured it out. This is the jubilee. I don't see how anyone, and there aren't very many that are arguing with the fact that Joshua entered into the promised land in 1406. What does Heather R say? If 1406, then 2025. And when you do the math, because of this pesky 0 year right here, we come to March 26th, or I think she's saying April the 8th of 2025. Now, the Hebrew calendar says April the 8th. We are literally 6 days away from that. On my timeline right now, as a matter of fact, here for me, as I'm making this, by the time you see this, it'll be way after that, but it's almost 7 p.m. here, Eastern Standard Time. At 7 p.m. will be 3 p.m. 7 p.m. That would be 3 a.m. Did I miss something? Oh, yeah. 7 p.m. for me here will be 3 a.m. in Israel. 3 o'clock in the morning is when I surmise that Jesus rose from the grave, 84 hours after he gave up the ghost on the cross. So, April the 3rd. Now, remember, we have this, and I learned this a long time ago with the other timeline. We have this extra day we have to contend with. There's actually only 364 days in a year. The Earth actually only spins 364 times in a year. But in order to keep solar noon, they rotate it and they add 4 minutes a day to the clock. It doesn't matter that they do that. No matter what they do, every year on March 16th will be the day of equal parts. That will take 364 rotations of the Earth, or 365 and a quarter on the Gregorian calendar. So that extra day always comes into play. That's not the problem. And we have to put that day somewhere. That's not the tricky part. The tricky part is where they put it. I've been asking forever, Lord, why is it that all these Gregorian dates match to the timeline except for May Day and April Fool's Day? Those two dates don't match. They don't match. And I was like, am I doing something wrong with my math? What's happening here? What's going on? It turns out that the extra day they added was, whoops, not there. The extra day they added was a March 31st. Beware of March, the Ides of March, beware. Jesus gave up the ghost at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on March 30th. April Fool's Day should have been the next day. Why didn't they come back here? But I got to go this way. Hold on. Why didn't they call it February 29th? Every single year for 3 years, and then on the fourth year, call it February the 30th. That would have made more sense than to and have it all in the same month than to add a day to March. They added a day to March. That's where the calendar, the timeline starts going wrong until those 4 minutes a day catch back up. So we have St. Patrick's Day, that lands. And I'm not saying, I'm telling you that the Gregorian calendar or the Julian calendar and all of these days that they put, St. Patrick's Day, the flood happened on Halloween. Um, Jesus was conceived on Christmas. John left in the womb on New Year's Day. All of these things did not line up by accident. No matter what the evil people decided to name it, Ishtar, Easter, or whatever they did, it doesn't matter. They all seem to line up with an event that we see on the Gregorian calendar, except for April Fool's Day and except for May Day. You see, May 2nd, because they've added a day. Everything would slide back a day if we didn't have March 31st. So April Fool's Day, Jesus defeats death. When did he say it was finished? He said it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It is finished. He says that in John, and in Luke he says, "Into thine hands I commend my spirit." And in Matthew and Mark he says, my Lord, why hast thou forsaken me?" He's simply saying, reverberating what people will say on that day. On that day, that's what they will say. Each group will say those things. Matthew and Mark will both say, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" Luke will say, "Into thine hands I commend my spirit." And John will say, "It is finished." And it will be. So we're off by a day right here, right? So I find it telling, and I made that comment to who was it? It was he made a video, and I made that comment. He's like, "Oh, that's a really cool find." And so that's what we do. We kind of help each other, not saying, "Hey, I'm right," but where would you add an extra day? Why did they put it on March 31st? Why did they make it March 31st and not put it back on February where they already add a day every fourth year? Why wouldn't they call it February 29th and then 30th when it comes around? All right, now I'm going to keep going here. So yeah, 3 o'clock in the morning. Let me zoom in a little bit here so you can see this. 3 o'clock in the morning for me on this timeline, right here, Jesus rises, which again, that's 9 minutes from now. It would be a perfect time because when he rises, remember the graves are thrown open. It says when God looks at an event, he looks at the entire event. And what we see is the graves are thrown open, and many of the bodies of the saints rose after Jesus rose. So we have somewhat of a timeline. After the moment Jesus rises, the dead in Christ rise, right? So one would think that would be a good rapture scenario. I've never changed this timeline. This timeline you're looking at, I built it 7 years ago, 6 years ago. Aside from figuring out that day off thing, aside from doing that, that's why I added this 4 minutes a day. Every day there's 4 minutes, 8 minutes, 12 minutes. It adds 4 minutes a day to every single day, and it fixes everything when I did that. But aside from that, this is the time Jesus rises. So many of the body of the saints rose with him and walked into the holy city. Could we see a rapture in the next 8 minutes? I don't know. I don't know. Here we have the wave sheaf offering 1 week later on April the 10th. Remember, he appears to Thomas in the upper room on a Sunday. This is a Sunday, okay? Uh, the days, like I said before, find your birthday on here. That's the day you were born. If you say, well, I was born on March 21st and it wasn't a Monday, it was a Wednesday, I know because I have the birth certificate. We're adding that day every year. You can never begin in a million years to track it back to when Jesus was on the cross or Jesus was born and say definitively, oh, yeah, I know he went to the cross because back in this year it was a Wednesday. It just won't work. Even the Gregorian calendar is off by a day every few thousand years. They have to make a correction. They have to add another day every, I don't even know what it is, 4,000 years. They have to add a day. So when you go back that far, you're dealing with that as well. So all kinds of math that we have to deal with. The one thing I notice is that there's always this delay. Nothing ever happens in relationship to this kind of stuff on the day unless it's on the if it's on the day, it's on the day. But if there's a delay, we never know how long it is. We just don't know. Jesus, 4,000 years later, was born. Exactly 4,000 years. Oh, excuse me. I worked hard today. But it's 7 days after atonement here. 7 days later is atonement, and 7 days earlier is atonement. So 14 days separation between Adam being created and Jesus being born. 4,000 years and 14 days. I There's always something a little bit in there. So we're in the Jubilee year right now. We're here. We're down here. This is the Jubilee year, and I'm going to say it again. I don't think that a rapture can happen at any other point other than a Jubilee. I think it must be a Jubilee. And why do I say that? The rapture could have happened at any point in here, at any point. But Jesus was caught, and his disciples were caught picking corn on the Sabbath. And Jesus made this very distinct statements saying, I am the Sabbath. Well, there is a weekly Sabbath. There is a 6 years you shall work the land, and 7 years, the seventh year it shall rest. It'll be a Sabbath to the land. And then every 50 years, there'll also be a Sabbath right here. So to me, that tells me that the rapture is going to occur. Now, remember what I said before. I do not see the tribulation saints being here for 3.5 years because it's not a jubilee. I showed you before that there's two jubilees running side by side. They're 7 years apart or a Shemitah cycle apart, exactly. One from when Adam was created, one from when Adam was removed from the garden. There's this time space from when he ate the fruit to when he was removed, 45 days. I don't know why, but it's like God forgot. He doesn't forget, he's God. But he's like, oh, wait a second. We got to get him out of this garden. He's been here for 45 days. We got to get him out because if he eats of the tree of life, he'll live forever. So they kick him out and they block the door. He can't get back in. It's almost like, of course, it's not, but it's like God just realized, wait a second, this can't happen. We have to fix this problem. So um, there was a period of time, right? A period of time afterwards. I showed this. This is how, if they would have paid attention to this guy back then, in 525 AD, this Catholic monk who created the BC and AD in 525 AD, they would have paid attention to his graph. They would have seen that BC and AD overlapped. They were the same. 5 BC to 5 AD is not 10 boxes. 5 plus 5 is not 10. It's 9. It is 9 boxes. It's if you don't stack these boxes right here, if you don't stack it together, remember, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It ends here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It shares this box. If it doesn't share this box, then you've added a 0 year inadvertently. And explaining this is like pulling teeth. This is a very difficult subject to explain to people, but that's what it is. If you put it beside it and you have 10 boxes, you have created a 0 year. You've accidentally created it. Yeah, I don't see anything in here that says 0. It does, though, because you have a space of time. In order to get from here to here, it takes a year. In order to get from here to here, it takes a year. Each one of these, because this is a fictitious space of time, BC and AD is fictitious. It never existed before. It was always counting from the beginning, like the Julian calendar, I believe still does, counts the days. It counts from the beginning. There was no reason to create a BC and AD, but when they did, they created a fictitious calendar. It's not a real, we are really not in 2024. We are really in 6027. That's what year it is. It's a Jubilee year. It's perfectly explainable using a Jubilee cycle, but people never understood. They're still trying to count Jubilees by 50. It's not 50 because it shares the first year of the Shemitah, and then it shares the next 49th year of the Shemitah, or the first year of the next 49th group. It's 49. That's how it counts. This is the 31st day. This is what I was trying to show you. If this didn't exist and we slid everything back, Jesus would have been on the cross, or rose from the grave on 4/4/31. 31 only because of that BC and AD thing. I hope I'm not confusing everybody with this. I'm getting to a point, and I'll show you the point. I've had discussions about this, the 10 virgins. The 10 virgins are not the bride. They're not the bride. They are not those who rule and reign with Christ. They all fell asleep. Every single one of them. I was listening to somebody, I don't remember who it was, but because I listened to so much, but they led me to this verse right here. This verse is in John 3:29. It clearly says, "He that hath the bride is the bridegroom." You cannot be called a bridegroom until you have your bride. A bridegroom can only be called a bridegroom if the bridegroom has the bride. We are the bride. We are the head. We are those that rule and reign with Christ. Okay. So then we go over here to read about the parable of the 10 virgins. We see this in Matthew 25. By the way, this is written in Matthew 25, which means it's written to the Jew and the sleepy church. It is not written to the bride. But we'll read through this. "Then shall the kingdom of heaven be likened unto 10 virgins, which took their lamps and went forth to meet the bridegroom." First of all, we don't go forth anywhere. Jesus did it all. We know that. We're saved, bar none. Don't have to do anything. I don't have to tithe. I don't have to get baptized. I don't have to do anything. Those who do to add to their salvation have missed this opportunity. They will be those 5 with oil. The debate whether or not they were saved before, I would have to say they are not, because all saved people are going in this rapture. But the moment that the rapture occurs, they're going to cast off all their filthy works and beg Jesus, please, please, please. And again, I don't think that the tribulation saint will be here longer than 6 months. I think they're going before or somewhere around the middle, around September, sometime, maybe October. I don't know exactly. There's a verse in there. We know the flood begins October 31st. And I have the timeline set up to looking at atonement as being when the Antichrist is going to reveal himself. And then we see this passage where it says, "Are there not yet 4 months?" But I tell you, the harvest is ready already. It's white. It's ready to be harvested. And I'm wondering if there's not a 4-month gap now. I looked at a 6-month gap, but I'm wondering if there's not a 4-month gap now. Of course, we're going to keep watching. Everything we see on the world scene says that it's going to happen, and it's going to happen very soon. We can easily prove now that we are in a Jubilee year. I can easily prove that Joshua did cross over in 1406. I know that Heather R. says, if 1406, well, I did the Jubilee cycle. And then I hear, well, you can't. Jubilee started right there. No, they didn't. They did not start with Joshua because it says, and it was the 50th Jubilee when he crossed over. If it wouldn't have been it would have been the first year of the Shemitah, and it could not have had the Jubilee because it winds up 49 years later. You see what I'm saying? That means they had to count back 49 years from a Jubilee to this Jubilee to know that this was Jubilee. It just makes sense. So when I count from 1406, I go back, it lands on 4003 BC. Perfectly. Absolutely perfectly. So not if 1406, it is 1406. Not if 2025, pesky zero year, it's actually 2024, but 2025 is the Jubilee year. All right. Why do they call him a bridegroom? He already has his bride. Remember what I showed you on the previous page? He cannot be called a bridegroom until he hath his bride. It clearly says it right there. He's called the bridegroom. Why? Because he had his bride. What's Jesus doing here? He's coming back to get the tribulation saints, those who have oil. Who don't have oil? The Jews still do not believe in him. They will not believe in him until the 3.5 year mark, where Satan goes in and proclaims himself to be God, and then they flee to Petra. The 7 years is for the Jew. Daniel's 70th week is for the Jew. That week is for them. I think the rapture occurs, and I think that the tribulation saints are going to see the Antichrist rise up. They'll be able to identify who he is. In Second Thessalonians, they'll see this great falling away, meaning the church will be cleared out of any Christians whatsoever, and they'll all be gone, taken to heaven. They're going to see that. Second Thessalonians is speaking to the tribulation saint, not to the bride. To the bride. First Thessalonians speaking to the bride. We will be caught up. Second Thessalonians, they will be gathered. That is not a rapture. The gathering is not a rapture. It's not the same word. It's a completely different word. So we go through this, and 5 of them were wise, and 5 were foolish, and they, how do I do this? Oh, and they that were foolish took their lamps and took no oil with them, but the wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps while the bridegroom tarried. What happened? Is that where the tarry is? Have we all been saying we're in a tarry period when we actually are not? That the tarry is meant for the tribulation saint? We see this word here, tarried. Anybody who's good at word searches and how often a word is used, it'd be very interesting to see if this tarried is the same tarry that we see and that we seem to associate with the bride, which I don't think it does. I don't think it belongs to the bride. I think this belongs to the tribulation saint. I don't think, I know, because he's called a bridegroom. He already has his bride. He's now here to pick up the tribulation saint, and I think it's a very short time, a month, few months, and then I think tribulation kicks off for 7 years. I think this is where the seals are open in this period of time up until Daniel's 70th week begins, which I think it begins in September. While the bridegroom tarried, they all slumbered and slept, and at midnight, now that word midnight is not an accurate word. That's sunset. That's what they call the midnight hour. It's not 12 o'clock midnight. They didn't have such a thing. It was sunset at 6 p.m. when the sun was just in the twinkling of an eye. That's when that happened. And again, remember, they all fell asleep. None of these are the bride. None of us are falling asleep. All of us are still searching for this. I guess a few of the watchers have fallen away over the years when their timelines didn't work out or their math didn't work out, and they started saying, nobody can know, I guess, if I can't. That's ridiculous. I don't know, but I'm still watching all these other people because they might know, and I'm just trying to figure out like the rest of them. All right, so and at sunset there was a cry made, behold, the bridegroom cometh. Called the bride because he already had a bridegroom because he already has his bride. Go out and meet him. That is, who was it that got out of the boat? Paul? I think it was it Paul that got out of the boat to walk across the water to Jesus? He came to meet Jesus halfway. We say we meet Jesus halfway because he's up there and we're going to go up and meet him halfway, but we aren't going to travel anywhere. We aren't going to have to do anything. Wherever you're sitting right now or driving or lying or whatever you're doing at that moment, you're just gone. That's it. Poof. You're up there that fast. It is a quick thing that happens. Go ye out and meet him. So again, then all those virgins arose, trimmed their lamps, and the foolish said, so we know this story very well. And I'm telling you that this story has nothing to do with the bride, and this Terry might, if the other Terry is related to this Terry, then the Terry might apply to the time from when the bride is taken to the time when the rest of the body is taken. Yes, the tribulation saint completes the body of Christ. They're going to heaven. They love the Lord. They just thought they had to do stuff. They were trying to pay him back. Thanks for your hard work. I'm going to give this money to kind of pay you back. I'm going to get baptized, kind of like you did. So I'm going to pay you back. Now you can go do all these things. You might even have the desire to do them, but you have to question your heart. Why do you want to do them? Are you trying to do them to add to something? Do you think in any kind of way that helped you? And the answer is no. You're only doing it as an outward expression of what's going on inside your heart. All right, let me keep going here. Let me see what I have. I've showed you this. I don't want to get into this, but this is, you find this in the book of Jubilees. For there will be those who will assuredly make observations of the moon, how it disturbs the seasons and comes in from year to year 10 days too soon. You're not supposed to use the moon to set anything, but the Hebrew calendar does. What am I supposed to do with that? If it turns out to be April the 8th, then God allowed the Hebrew calendar to be used. And what calendar is the Hebrew calendar? The sliver moon. The full moon will never work. Never, ever, never, never, ever will the full moon calendar ever, never, ever amount to anything. So if you're using the full moon, you will never even come close to the rapture date. I think there's only two viable timelines that might function, and that's this one, this timeline using the equinox and only equilux, and I only say that because it's the most solid date we have to start anything. Equinox moves around by 6 hours every year, goes forward, goes back to the moon. Forget about it. It's 10 days off. So using the sliver moon on the Hebrew calendar, though, maybe that's the one God's gonna use because Israel is our timepiece. But then go back. I don't know. I don't know. My rapture day passed, right? March 16th, when I thought it was going to happen, it didn't. So here we are. We're still trying to figure this out. Let's see. This is the earth. No. Oh, I think I found this funny. I found this in the book of Jubilees. Excuse me, in the book of Jubilees, and I think this is the wife that Dr. Barry's always making fun of. That we don't know the wife's name of Noah. Well, her name was Naamah. There you go, Dr. Barry. There's her name. What's my name? I found this in the book of Jasher. I think this is the book of Jasher, actually. It might be the book of Jasher, which we know we have a reference in our Bible where it says, is it not written in the book of Jasher, right? So these extra biblical books are books that can be read, but they are historical books. They give us a little bit more detail on a subject, but they are not the gospel of Jesus Christ. They are not the word of God. And why do I say that? Because there's a very serious warning at the end of Revelation about adding or taking away. Let me ask you this. Let's say 1,000 years ago that the book of Enoch was in the Bible, and I believe it was actually, and then a group of people took it out. Here we are 1,000 years later. Can we add it back in? No, there's a very strict warning at the end of Revelations that we can't change it. So if you try to add it back in, you are every bit as guilty as the person that took it out if they weren't supposed to take it out. You see what I'm saying? You can't change anything. You can't add it. So the King James Bible is done. It's finished. There are many other Bibles that have taken passages out and added them back in. Why don't we go demand that they add those passages back into those Bibles? No, they should have never taken it out in the first place. It stays out. Don't read those Bibles. Read the King James. It is the most accurate one that we have. Few minor errors here and there, but for the most part, it's the most accurate Bible that we have. and it's very, very accurate, very good Bible. Are there older Bibles? Yes, there are, but not as much attention to detail was put into those other Bibles that are older than the King James Bible. It is the most accurate. I'm not stating that I'm a King James only Bible guy. You can read other Bibles, but if something's missing, you know they're in trouble. You don't contact them and say, add it back in. Why? Because you've just violated the last verse in Revelation. You don't add or take away. You don't attempt to go in and reinstitute Enoch into the Bible. You don't do it because it's a very strict warning there, any more than they should have removed it 1,000 years ago. You see what I'm saying? Can you find a Bible from 1,000 years ago with the book of Enoch in it? And read that Bible. Yes. Can you demand that every Bible turn into that Bible? No. Get that Bible, read that Bible, and be satisfied with that fact. But don't demand any change because there's a very, very, uh, there's two things that you don't do. You don't step on Superman's cape. You don't spit into the wind. You don't take a single word out of the Bible or add a single word, and that means forever, from beginning until now. Even now, you don't add those words that they might have taken out back then. You just don't do it. There's certain things you don't do, and you don't blaspheme the Holy Spirit. That means that God has presented himself to you, and you decided not to listen. You decided that this is a joke, none of this is real, and you decided not to listen. You blaspheme the Holy Spirit, and that is a penalty that you will have to suffer. Hopefully, you'll recognize that this is not a joke, that this is serious, what we're doing here, and that you should listen and you should kneel down, and you don't have to have any kind of formula. I say go to a quiet place. You can do it right where you're at. It doesn't matter. God doesn't have some kind of formula that you have to do. And after you do it, you don't have to do anything after that. You don't have to do anything. Just do it because you want to, but not because you have to. So that's the difference between the bride and the tribulation saint is the tribulation saint believe that there's something else. And you have to watch them. It's, they are very, subtle in their explanations. Oh, I believe that we're saved by Jesus and Jesus only, but by now the Holy Spirit should have got a hold of you and you should know this stuff. That's works. That's works. The only reason I know what I know is because of the Holy Spirit. But knowing what I know doesn't save me in any kind of way. My desire to know what I want to know is because of the Holy Spirit. But thinking for a moment that because I don't know what somebody else knows or somebody else is smarter than me or better than I am at this and this and this, that is a work. You have to be careful. They say that Satan comes in, he comes in so subtly, so unbelievably subtly and makes you convinced that you're mightier than what you are. You know, we are nothing apart from Christ. Nothing. All right. So Noah's wife's name, Naamah. There you go, Dr. Barry. Noah was 498 years old when he took Naamah for his wife. Noah was 502 years old when Naamah bare Shem. The boys grew up and went into the Lord of the ways, and all Methuselah and Noah and their father came. So, anyway, I wanted to show that to you. How old was Noah when he began to build the ark? Many people will say he was 480 because when he was 600, he got under the ark. This is in the book of Jasher. This is a book that the Bible references. In his 595th year, Noah commenced to make the ark. Noah spent 5 years building the ark. When his father died, Lamech, when his father died, is when he buried his father, he began building the ark. 1 week prior to the flood, on October 31st, when Noah was turning 600, when the flood began, Methuselah died 1 week prior. I'm sorry, on October the 25th. He died. Noah buries him. He goes and sits in the ark. The ark door stayed open. People are saying it was closed. He's kind of sat in there and sweltered for a week. And no, the ark door stayed open. God shut that door to protect him at the last possible second when the rains began to fall. That's when the ark door shut. So again, he preached for 115 years, but then the last 5 years he commenced to building this ark. He did not spend 120 years building the ark. He spent five. He began building it when his father died, and he finished building it and went into the ark on the day that Methuselah died. All right. I showed you this before. If 4003 BC, then 2025, and it adds up to 6028. The problem is 123 jubilees times 123 jubilees, it comes up to 6027. We're a year off because of that 0 year. Even the guy who came up with this back in 525 AD recognized that both of these had to share. That's why it looks like this. It had to share that day. He knew that, but since then it all went awry, and they simply get confused, and just because people have an emotion over something, they start believing the wrong things, and you got to be careful with that. This is what we read in Revelation 22. For I testify unto every man that heareth the words of the prophecy of this book, if any man at any time shall add unto these things. Let's add the book of Enoch back in. Come on. It says right here. I don't care if it was in there before. They're going to get punished for their sin of taking it out. Don't join them and get punished for the sin of putting it back in. We have the King James. That's it. The book of Enoch does not belong in the King James. Just to make that statement, you're in violation of this law. Very, very important law. You have to be super careful with this, with what you're saying. So no, the book of Enoch, no other book, none of them. 85, they're like, oh, there should be another 50 books. I don't even know what you're talking about. It says it right here. You can't change it. It's over with. You couldn't, if they took them out back then, they're going to be punished for it. Let them be punished. What we have now, you can't add to it. It says here, add or take away. We can't change it, you know? I know people are thinking, well, that just means, just to go in and be a bad person and change. No, that means putting the book of Enoch back in there. You can't do it. Dangerous stuff. Dangerous stuff. The death of Jesus. Only in the book of Matthew do we see this sentence, or these two passages. We don't see it in Mark, we don't see it in Luke, and we don't see it in John. The graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose. It says that which slept arose. Again, God's looking at the entire event. The entire event lasted 3.5 days. So, did the graves get blown open? And for 3.5 days, these dead bodies lied there, and came out of the graves after his resurrection. No, God's looking at the entire event. When Jesus rose and came out of the tomb, and that big boulder was moved out of the way, all those graves were blown open, and those people came up out of those graves. There would have been some serious historical stuff talked about if graves are thrown open and for 3.5 days, dead people were just lying there in disgrace for 3.5 days out. And you don't think somebody would have gone in and started burying them? You know what I'm saying? So no, the graves are thrown open when Jesus rose and they came out of the graves. It appears as though it says that the graves are thrown open. They kind of laid there, kind of chilled out, played Uno with Jesus for those 3.5 days, whatever he did. And then the graves are thrown open on the day that they came out of the graves. It's the same event. God just looks at the entire event as one sequence. All right. The death of Jesus. I just wanted to show you that you won't see that thing about the graves being thrown open. So I wonder, or I ponder, why is that only written in Matthew? Why is it not written in John, Luke, or Mark? Why is it only written in Matthew? Makes one stop for a second and go, I showed you this. Jesus spent 33 Passovers actually, but you can Google this, you can see it, and it says contains evidence of a fourth Passover that Jesus attended. So we see in the Gospels that Jesus attended at least 3 Passovers, and there's a possibility that there was a fourth, and I'm going to show you why there actually was 4 after oh, I'm already here. That was fast. All right. So explaining this is a bit difficult because there is a passage that Bill the artist found that I'm still grappling with trying to understand. Aside from explaining it out as the calendars are all messed up and we don't know exactly, he comes up with a very valid point that Jesus was baptized on atonement, not in 26 AD, but 29. The only argument I have is that at this point here, they're just changing the year over. And we also have to deal with that 0 year. And all of this is AD. So we could be as far as 2 years off, which should take 29 AD back to 27 AD. I don't know. It's something I'm still trying to work on, trying to figure out how that verse is in there. And what his what his argument is, and then that's why, and sorry, Bill, I respect you for all your work. That he does a lot of work in Discord, but the only thing take issue with is that he's starting creation not 4,000 years before Christ. He's taking away the entire event of Jesus and the flood and the 6 months, and he's not allowing that to be in there. And he's calling this the year 6,000. It just simply isn't. It just isn't. I think, correct me if I'm wrong. Hopefully I'm not, but I believe he's not quite convinced. Maybe I am wrong about that. I don't recall. Not quite convinced that Jesus, I think you said Jesus was 33 and a half, but that possibly Jesus didn't spend 3.5 years. I might have that wrong. I don't want to misrepresent what Bill the artist has said. So this has been working on my mind for quite some time since he said it. So I did this. How many Passovers was Jesus here for? I can't change creation from 4003. Can't do it. I can't change the fact that Jesus was 33 or was 35 days before his 30th birthday. He was born on September the 30th on Tabernacles. 5 days prior to, I even heard somebody try to explain about 30, meaning he's 30 and a half. And I'm like, oh, come on. He, he, it would have just said he was 30. It was about 30, meaning it was 5 days before his birthday. His birthday is on Tabernacles, and he was baptized 40 days prior to September the 24th, and he was started his ministry now. He actually started his ministry 40 days later on the Day of Atonement. 3 days after that, he turns water to wine. 2 days after that is his birthday on Tabernacles, and he starts his ministry here on September the 24th. Now, because of the 0 year, I am stuck making the statement that Jesus went to the cross in 31 AD. He actually went to the cross in 30 AD, but because of that 0 year, we've had to move everything in the year 31 AD. So he starts his ministry here. His first Passover comes here. Forget about the year. Let's just count just because of the year. Let's just count by year. The first Passover is here, second Passover, third Passover, and he is the fourth Passover. How do I know that? How do I know that? Because he was started his ministry here. 6 months later, he has a Passover. 1 year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, 6 months, 1, 2, 3. 3.5 years is how long his ministry was, meaning he had to be here for 4 Passovers. On the fourth Passover, he became the Passover lamb. He was here for 4 Passovers. If anyone tells you differently, they're telling you that Jesus' ministry did not last 3.5 years. The only way to mathematically make this work is Jesus, on the Day of Atonement, began his ministry. 6 months later, he enjoyed Passover. Then 1 year, 2 years, 3 years ministry, 3.5 years, he would have been on his fourth Passover, which is why they are discovering in the Gospels that it appears as though there are four, but they don't know how to nail it down because they're like, but his ministry was 3.5. How did he go to four Passovers? I just showed you. From this Passover to this Passover is a year, 2 years, 3 years. He had to be here for four Passovers. And from atonement to Passover, 6 months, 3.5 years. Jesus lived 33.5 years. Jesus spent 3.5 years in his ministry. Jesus was born 4,000 years after creation and 2,000 years after his death on the cross. And he will be back to us to take us up on 2025, which is actually 2024, but 2025. So that's the end of that. I will post this. Let me see. How do I? Oh, I do this. All right. Ah, it's hot out here in the secret broadcast cave. I will post this as a premiere. I got to go in and make sure nobody else is doing videos. It seems to agitate them when I upload a video. When they're uploaded, I don't want to do that. So I got to make sure nobody's having a live. What day is it? Oh, it's Wednesday. I know who's doing a live. I can't do my. I'll post it later on. After. Why do I always? I just have the. My mind, my memory for names is the worst. He's gonna go live. Oh no, it's not that one. Hold on. I'm not gonna find it, am I? He's live every Wednesday. The guy's fantastic, and I know that Spinebreaker is gonna be mad at me for not remembering his name. I'm just the worst at names. It's nothing personal. I just don't remember names. Uh, yeah, I can't find it. I can't find it. What a shame. Anyway, he'll be on tonight. Oh, why can't I find it? Come on. Yeah, I can't find it. I have like 400. I'm subscribed to like 400 people. So anyway, uh, yeah, that's not good, is it? I can't find it. Oh, you know what? Uh, well, I guess it won't matter by then because I'm going to let him go on first. He's a pastor. Come. Oh, Last Days Awakening. Got it. Last Days Awakening. What time are you on? 150 people. Oh, he's on now. I guess it won't really matter because he'll be off by the time this gets uploaded. All right, Last Days Awakening. Sorry about that. Anyway, go to a quiet place by yourself. Nobody needs to know, and you need to tell anybody except the Lord in your heart. A lot of math there, but it's common sense math. It just has to fit. It has to work. When do I think we're going? Well, it passed 7 o'clock already, so Jesus has effectually risen from the grave, and the women have found the thing empty. Jesus will ascend in the afternoon. It's 3 a.m., so he will ascend in the afternoon, probably 3 p.m. In Israel, what we would call tomorrow at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He will ascend, and he will stay somewhere for 7 days. And on the eighth day, he will do the wave sheaf offering. He will do the wave sheaf offering with barley. And then that afternoon, he will return to Thomas in the upper room. Now, on the Hebrew calendar, April the 8th, which is still 6 days away, April the 8th, we will see what they call the triumphant entry. And then we will see 4 days later, on the 13th or the 12th at sunset, I would imagine, we will see Passover. So if God is using that calendar, keep your eyes up and keep watching. Everything's lighting up and it's all about to transpire anyway, no matter what we do. All we're trying to do is warn people that this event is getting close and it could happen in the next few seconds. And you don't have much time left to cast off all your works and everything and accept Jesus on his terms. And his terms are, he did it all. He did everything. There's nothing we can do to help him, repay him, uh, assist him in any kind of way in what he already did. So All right, Repo Man 64. We will chat with you all again later. I don't know why I couldn't share on StreamYard. I don't even know what happened. So I'll try to figure what happened out with that later on. So, all right, we will chat with you all again later.